Hey guys, listeners of the Beers and Bros podcast, thanks for watching the video, thanks for tuning in. Obviously, due to the circumstances that we have to do kind of things a different way now, so um, we're kind of doing things in a way that allows us to make content on our own now, because we have to be away. So uh, it's just me today, and the boys will do some other content on their own as well, Noah and Chance. I'm Kevin, obviously. And today is going to be really awkward because I am by myself. I've never done something by myself before, but we just want to put some stuff out there for you guys to listen to while you're quarantined. And some cute little topics and segments here and there to kind of keep you guys not updated, but entertained, I should say, in a way that gives us something to do and gives you guys something to look forward to and to look at. So I got my setup with me today. I'm using my own phone. I got my recording laptop here in the Blue Snowball still. I'm not drinking today, just Gatorade because my throat's a little dry. And I do have a topic for you today. It's an interesting one. I think it's an interesting one. It's one that I mentioned in one of our podcasts before. And I kind of just went over it, and not like necessarily we talked about it, but I kind of just mentioned it, and then kind of moved on from it. So I like to come back and revisit that topic once again. I do have a lot of stuff in my notepad. I had to write some stuff down to keep it fresh in my brain about this topic, because it's an interesting one. It's kind of one based on some controversy. It's got a lot of facts and stuff in there, but I'm no expert in this topic. The only reason I'm talking about it and familiar with it is because I had a course on it in the fall. I am a student, so I had a course on it. I thought it was an interesting course. It really gave me some perspective about the stuff that's happening in the sports world, because that's what I'm going to talk about sports today. So if that interests you, stay tuned. We're going to get into some controversial stuff here. But like I said, yeah, I did talk about it on a previous podcast. We kind of just, I kind of just said something, and it may have threw you guys off a little bit. It may have not have been, but I just kind of said it and we moved on because I said we're going to revisit it as a later topic, and we just never did. So I kind of want to just put everything out there on the line by myself, so I decided this would be a great topic to start this individual content type stuff with. And so we're going to just jump right into it. Today, sorry for the slurping. I'm a big slurp guy, and we got some Gatorade. I don't know why, but side topic here, is it just me, or is, drinks like Gatorade and Hawaiian Punch, they just never get cold, man. It's just weird. Like, I feel like I could put it in ice for the whole day and it'll just never be cold. But that's just me. Anyways, so the topic we're going to talk about today is performance enhancing drugs, PEDs, and kind of my views on PEDs. Where might some new rules lead to, some other things like that, some arguments for PEDs, some arguments against PEDs, and kind of just my overall thoughts on the subject. So what I actually said in a podcast, back when we first started podcasting, was that I think this was in the fall. I was taking this course actually, and so what I had said was that I'm actually for the legalization of performance-enhancing drugs. And I think at the time, Chance and Noah kind of looked at me strangely, and I was just like, that's a later topic, we'll get into it at a different time. So in order for me to get all my information out there for why I have a view on PEDs, some of the actual statistics behind PEDs, I wanted to do this segment by myself, so that way I could just like talk and ramble on, because in a regular podcast, I think it'd probably take me 20 minutes to talk about this topic, and then no one chance to just be sitting there. So this gives me a way to kind of just introduce that topic by myself and for you guys. So we're gonna jump right into it. So firstly, like I said, I'm not an expert on this kind of topic or anything. I just had one class in it. I do think it's interesting. I do have some notes here provided to me for the class that I still have, so I'm going to use those as well, just for like little bits of information here and there. So mostly, I didn't do any research on this topic, like necessarily. I do, have the information for the class. I don't even have the book anymore, honestly. I nailed the class. I did a great job, and I got an A. But that's besides the point. So the point is that all this information is kind of just coming from my head, from what I remember in class. So don't judge me if rules, if things are different than what I say, or if I'm not 100% accurate. Just bear with me on some of these ideas, okay? So firstly, my views on PEDs, performance enhancing drugs. That's the acronym. So right now, at sports stand, I like to follow by the rules, and so that for me would mean the illegalization of PEDs as they are now, where players are not allowed to use them or else they'll get banned. And that's just on the basic standings of now, where sports has these performance enhancing drugs banned. So, but in a case of where sports, for whatever reason, or the anti-drug organizations such as WADA, they decided to legalize drugs and make them all, permitted, then I would say that I would be for that. If they came to some sort of vote, I would probably support that vote to legalize performance enhancing drugs. But that would be under some new rules, and of course I'll get into some of that stuff, like how would that work, what would athletes, how would the sporting events work, and we can talk about some of those scenarios later on. But first I just want to get into why I believe those things, and it starts with basically four main things: the medical side, the financial side, the entertainment side, and even the statistics side. So we're just going to jump into the medical side of it. Medically, I believe that performance enhancing drugs, part of it is we know some of these drugs work. We know for a fact testosterone and the steroidal kind of drugs, we know they work for a fact as far as performance enhancing drugs go. And a lot of those drugs that, the pain reducing drugs, we know they work, the pills at least. But there's some things that we just don't know. And we will never know, because WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, it's the big anti-drug organization that covers the Olympics and mainly those type of big events. I do want to say that U.S. sports, NFL, NBA, NHL, MLS, all those type of sports are regulated by themselves. So they may follow WADA rules, but and regulations, but they're kind of on their own as far as like, ADA, the WADA can, ban one drug, and NFL be like, no, we they can take that, that'll be okay. So that's the difference there. But as far as like, if WADA bans, certain drugs on basically three principles. One, if it's an actual performance enhancing drug and enhances performance. Another, if it harms the athlete in any way, and another if it violates the integrity of the sport or the spirit of the sport, so to speak. So that definition is really vague, and that's one of the reasons I would be for the legalization of drugs, is because they use the spirit of the sport definition as kind of like being a good sportsman, following the rules, like basic like sportsmanship type stuff. So that definition is really vague, and what they do basically is for these drugs that these doctors are kind of putting out that aren't necessarily performance enhancing or not necessarily harming the athlete in any way, they use that definition as sort of a basis to ban the drug anyways. And so there's a lot of these drugs that we know for a fact work, and there's a lot of these drugs that we don't know for a fact work, and that's part of it is because WADA is kind of like scared of, they don't want athletes to be using these drugs because they may have performance enhancing aspects. But I don't necessarily agree with the fact that they're banning them on the sole basis of that spirit of the sport definition. But that's a really strong argument for WADA, and a lot of people who are against drug use in sport is that it violates the integrity of the sport. That's the main back argument to anti-drug right now. And you can provide all these facts, like I said, that it doesn't even have performance enhancing effects, it doesn't harm the athlete anyway, and then people are still going, well, it's harming the integrity of the sport. All these athletes are natural, and now this one's using drugs. Well, in the case that I'm thinking of, in the scenario that I'm thinking of, is that if WADA drops all the bans, then what would stop you from using that certain drug if it had no harmful effects, and if it wasn't providing any performance enhancing capability? Why are we even banning it in the first place? So that's part of like the medically, as far as like every drug has a side effect, right? But some of them have really bad side effects, and some of them have relatively not so bad side effects. So it's just a pros and cons thing. And personally, I believe that an athlete, they kind of want to compete at the highest level. They want to be the best in their sport. To me, an athlete would pretty much do anything to be the best in their sport, and if that means taking an experimental drug without knowing the side effects, but knowing how it may increase some sport performance, I believe elite athletes would probably take those type of things. So, personally, I don't believe they should be banning drugs based on no research, especially when we definitely can't get research, or doctors can't get research, especially after it's been banned already, because you just can't use it. It's banned unless they choose an amateur athlete that's really not too involved in sport. But then they couldn't compete or anything. I mean, maybe in amateur sports they could, because amateur sports are a little bit loose on their, anti-drug kind of regulations. But if you want to actually see amateur sports being kind of like taken down for their drug use, you should watch the documentary that I suggested to Chance and Noah that they never got around to watch. Icarus. It shows an amateur. It's on Netflix. It shows an amateur athlete, cycling athlete, who's pretty much just trying to test the limits of WADA and the anti-doping agency in amateur sports by secretly taking drugs and then racing against regular amateur athletes without testing and all this stuff. And that's another argument as well that actually leads me into my next why I believe they should be legalized. But before I get into that, I do want to say, watch the documentary. Get some great insight into the Russia controversy in the past Olympics, where they were pretty much doping. 87 to 90% of their athletes were doping, and that's why they've been granted. They were supposed to compete in the Olympics this year. I think it was 2020 Olympics, Summer Olympics. Of course, that's been delayed to 2021 due to the coronavirus. But Russia athletes were allowed to compete under I don't know how the Olympics works, but there is a subset of ways you can run that's not a part of your country. So Russia was banned from sports, but Russian athletes that tested negative for performance enhancing drugs and other things that are banned by WADA were allowed to compete under I believe it's like a united flag or something that's like a universal flag or something like that, so that way they could actually still compete in their events. But so my next topic is actually why do I believe it, why do I believe they should be legalized, but on the kind of like financial aspect. So I've done medically, I'm going to talk about financially here in a second. So financially, it's kind of a weird topic to talk about because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but actually some of our tax money that we give goes to these anti-doping agencies that do tests and stuff on athletes, so that way they figure out if they're doping or not. So you think about people that live in Arkansas, the taxes that they give to the state actually go into some of these tests that do the University of Arkansas athletes to make sure they're not doping. But NCAA has better regulations, but it's just like these labs that have to test the athletes, and they give it to the NCAA anti-drug, whatever it is, to find these athletes. And a lot of NCAA athletes, they're not doping, but I think the risk. So kind of off track right quick financially is a lot of these athletes that would be doping necessarily would be high school athletes getting into NCAA, and then the NCAA athletes getting into the NFL, or I guess like any professional sport really. So it's kind of these transition periods that they would be taking these drugs because they have to pretty much advance to the next level, right? They have to match up with these guys in the pro leagues. But aside from that, financially, what I believe this is because strictly from the tax related things. So personally, I don't believe like, they may be catching at the University of Arkansas. They may be catching, I don't know, maybe 10 players a year that are, violating some sort of anti-drug policy. And that's not performance enhancing, that's just some sort of drug, and that's just some sort of policy, right? Whether it be denying a drug test, that's a violation. Or whether it be, you're not telling us, where you are, outside on some sort of spring break, that's a violation, because you could be taking drugs over there, and University of Arkansas might not have tests to test you, but because you say you know where you are, a violation just in case, because the university doesn't want to get in trouble, right? So that's where your money goes to. Your money goes to these anti-drug labs, basically, that the University of Arkansas uses to test their athletes. And like I said, they may be finding like 10 athletes, and there's so many other things that I'd rather have my tax money go to than testing athletes for using drugs. Especially when statistically they're not catching many at all. And that's another topic I want to get into statistically. It's kind of short, but it's just an example of, your money goes into these programs. Well, how well are they using the money? You know what I mean? So it's just something to think about. But it financially and statistically kind of go side by side. So I want to skip actually to statistically, forgetting the entertainment side for now. So for an example of statistics, like I said, so U of A may be getting like 10 athletes a year on your money, your tax money, to catch these athletes doping well. To put in perspective, the NBA, I did some research on this when I had to write my paper for this class. The NBA has 30 roster players, and there are 30 teams in the NBA. The NBA caught, I believe they what did they do? Maybe violated or found violations in 10 players out of the whole NBA. They found violations in 10 players. I mean, of course they give out violations for, like I said, you're not telling us where you are, so that's a violation. But I mean, they found violations in people taking performance enhancing drugs in like 10 athletes. So think about it, 30 teams, 30 roster players each. I don't know the math on that. I can find it out if I want to, but I just don't want to because my phone's recording and my laptop's here. So, do the math by your own. They found 8 to 10 players a year based on all those athletes, and that statistic is just not enough for me to believe that the WADA and those anti-drug agencies are actually doing what they're meant to do. Because if they have all these drugs banned and they find only certain ones out in the public, then it doesn't, like back on the medical side, like they have all these banned substances and they're only finding a certain amount in like these players, right? And so why would they be banning all these substances? And then it goes back to statistics. Well, they're not even finding that many substances in athletes anymore. So I don't know. I just believe that they should legalize drugs because it would get away with the anti-drug agencies. My tax money wouldn't go to them, and it would just be the rules and regulations. They wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be such tight rules and regulations for these things. And the part on the rules and regulations, like I get it how they want to, because of right now the way the rules are, that they have to have such tight regulations. But just to put in some perspective of the type of drugs that they're banning, WADA has what's called the prohibited list, which is like the for sure banned substances out there. And the substances include, basically all your steroidal drugs, some cannabinoids. I'm pretty sure WADA still has marijuana banned. They also have banned, mostly all those other type of drugs like cocaine and like especially like the hardcore drugs, and also the drugs that just straight up enhance performance, right? They have all those banned as well, but they also have what's called the monitored list. Now the monitored list is drugs that WADA looks at every year. He sees how much players use of it, see how many players use it, and then determine whether or not it should be banned for the next year. Now, the reason that there's a substance on there that might throw you guys off a little bit in terms of some of you guys might be saying, I'm for the banning of drugs right now, and I would agree, I'm for that. But based off of this substance right here, this is why I think WADA and the anti-drug agencies are sketchy, because on the monitored list is caffeine. So caffeine actually used to be banned, but then WADA took over from there was an anti-drug corporation before that was in charge of rules and regulations on drugs. WADA took over and took caffeine off, but it's still on the monitored list. Now, what does that mean? So the monitored list, like I said, they look at how many athletes use caffeine. Because they take a urine sample pretty much randomly, and so they get all these numbers out. They're like, oh, they have this much caffeine in their body. Like, is this much caffeine actually going to enhance performance? And that's what they look at on the monitored list. But that just seems really sketchy to me, because you're telling me that if you found an athlete that was doing so well and they had a certain amount of caffeine in your body, that you would go to the lengths of banning caffeine. That means you would not allow athletes to drink coffee, eat chocolate, or even have a soda, like before an event, or like prior to an event. Like I said, before an event, even after an event, in between events, they could not have that stuff, because that stuff has caffeine in it. Now, what they could do is they could ban it and say you can have this much in your body before an event, and after an event, and during an event. But like, still, and the regulations on caffeine is insane. I just mean, like, caffeine's an ordinary thing. If someone told me that you have too much caffeine in your body, you can't compete, I'd be outraged, because caffeine technically is not performance enhancing. Now, it does have capabilities such as increased focus, heightened sensitivity. I mean, obviously, you guys know when you drink a soda, or more than one soda at a time, it wakes you up kind of. It's like a caffeine. It's like a caffeine boost, right? You drink your coffee, you're good to go in the morning. It's the same thing it does with athletes, right? But at the same time, if you're in archery, you're not gonna have a caffeine boost, because you're gonna be all jittery and it's gonna throw off your aim. That's like an Olympic sport. Like, archers aren't gonna use caffeine, so it's like, I mean, you're really gonna ban caffeine? It's really got almost no performance. It's an everyday stimulant. Like, you're gonna really ban it? Like, that just doesn't seem right to me. Even it shouldn't even be on the monitored list, in my opinion. It should just be something that nobody cares about. I mean, it's caffeine. It's almost like saying, like, you can't have so much sugar in your body. That to me is almost insane. But there are some drugs that right now, because of the rules, they should be banned. But then there's some, like caffeine, that like really gotta even put it on the monitored list of all things. It just doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, that's kind of just a fishy thing, in my opinion. Is why would all these things be on the monitored list? Like, they've been kind of shown to not even have performance enhancing capabilities. For example, NFL just recently said that they're going to stop violating NFL players for testing positive for marijuana use. Now, that's a huge step in the drug legalization world, because marijuana has no performance enhancing capabilities. It also does not harm athletes in any way. But because it doesn't do those two things, like I said before, people will argue against it because it violated the spirit of the sport. Now, because of the U.S. and how things are kind of going as far as states legalizing marijuana, NFL probably thought it was a good decision to go ahead and legalize marijuana use. I don't know if they're like legalizing it for teams that are located in states where it's legal. I don't know if that's how that's working. Sorry for the dogs barking in the background, but that's Lil's. She's my sister's little doggy. So I don't really know if that's how they're working as far as marijuana use goes, but I just know that NFL said they're going to stop violations on players using marijuana, which is huge, because in the sports world, marijuana was used as a pain relieving drug, because athletes didn't want to take all these pain pills that have all these horrible negative side effects, depression, heart damaging side effects, joint, obviously, the main things that come with pain pills, addictions, really, are the main things, opioid use. And that's what they were giving athletes, opioids, right? And so you have to look and you have to say, okay, well, is it really better to have our athletes using opioids and, essentially being withered away from the sport because of them, or would it just be better to allow athletes to consume marijuana and then be relieved of pain and then just be good for the next event, which is basically what athletes were using it for. Obviously, there's recreational use of it, which is pretty much common now, but there's also the medical side to it. So you have to look at kind of both sides. But that's why I think WADA is sketchy, and I don't really believe in the organization, is because marijuana was on their ban for a long time. It was up there with like steroids, and so you just have to take a step back and say, well, I mean, it's still banned for WADA, but NFL took a step back and said, look, like really, the USA's permitting cannabinoid use, and we should too. So I think that was a step in the right direction for them, but. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next kind of argument for why they should be allowed, because it's kind of getting a little cheeky here at 26 minutes. So one of the other reasons I believe it is for entertainment. So a huge counter argument for drugs should be banned is that it won't be fun to watch. All these doped up athletes won't be fun to watch. Like it's like almost like cheating. Well, I would say it's the exact opposite. I'd say it'd be way more fun to watch. It wouldn't be cheating if they were all legalized, because every athlete would have the option to use the drugs. And as far as entertainment goes, it would just be great to see somebody be the best that they can be. I mean, we already have elite athletes doing the best, like the best that's ever been seen, really. But to push it one step further, if they could just push their body one step further with a performance-enhancing drug, I don't know who wouldn't want to see that. I mean, some guy, it could, what's his name? I'm not sure. But he just broke the marathon record for under two hours. That was never even heard of. But that's what the new technology of shoes and running equipment and training, better training, better diet, like all those things have advanced, but anti-drug hasn't advanced. So, all these things are allowed to progress. Technology is allowed to get better. Diets are allowed to get better. Like when the first athlete started eating vegan and he started doing good, there was no one to say we should ban vegan diets in the sport. No one said that. So why would they do the same thing for drugs? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it does, but relatively, if they were all legalized, then it wouldn't make sense in that aspect. So entertainment-wise, like I would love to see someone go even further than breaking 2-hour marathon. I would love to see someone taking drugs and beating the world record on high vault, like or pole vault or high jump or these type of things. Like I would want to see people give their whole body up for the sport and be the best that they can be, because like I said, the athlete mindset is, if I can be the best I can be in a sport, I would take this experimental drug because I want to be there no matter what the harmful effects on me. And that was the mindset for a lot of athletes in the 60s and 70s, where there wasn't a lot of drug testing. That's what they were doing. They were saying, I'll take this drug if I can be the best there is. Like, I just want to win a championship. Like, that's the athlete mindset. And so for me, if it was all legalized, I believe mostly every athlete would be using drugs. But as far as entertainment goes, for people that say want to be entertaining, I would just say that's completely false. You watch sports for the entertainment. You watch sports because you yourself can't do what they are doing on the court. And you yourself, like me, I can't be a 6'11" Kevin Durant and shoot 35 footers. So I watch him play. I just can't do that. So I think that's the point of sports, is you watch it to entertain and kind of visualize the sport. And to me, I think it would be just as entertaining to watch athletes on drugs doing sports just like every other athlete would naturally. So that's kind of why I believe that they should be legalized. I talked about it, medically, financially, statistically. As far as entertainment goes, I think it would be even more entertaining, more records broken. But it's kind of like an interaction thing. If you're watching the video, comment below on this topic here, on your thoughts on it. So one of the counter arguments right now is people who have broken records in the past, like Mark McGwire, a baseball player who I think he beat a home run record at one point. Let us know if you think that athletes who broke a record and later tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, if their record should be taken away. Personally, I don't think it should be taken away. I think it's the history of the sport. I think there should be an asterisk by it that says this person was on performance-enhancing drugs at the time, which is fair, but I don't think we should take away the achievement that they accomplished and anything like that, because if you look at Mark McGwire, like, you know, he said, you know, anybody can take performance-enhancing drugs. That's no question. He said, I did it. Pretty much anybody in MLB was doing it at the time. But he said, not everybody can still hit the baseball like I could. And that's a fair argument, you know. I can't go out there and hit a 98 mile per hour fastball, but Mark McGwire could. And even if I was taking performance-enhancing drugs, I still couldn't do it. But Mark McGwire could still do it without it. And so that's the reason why I think they should not be taken away, because it still involves the skill of the sport at that point, breaking a record like that. So personally, I don't believe that record should be taken away if an athlete later violates performance-enhancing drug use. Okay. Now, onto some counter arguments, because I feel like I did a lot of talking, and I feel like I've shared my point of view. So some counter arguments to kind of my logic would be, like I said, it won't be fun to watch, which is a fair argument, I could say, because, you know, watching athletes and looking at them and seeing them do so well, and then, you know, taking a step back and going, oh, well, they're on drugs, so it's not really fair. I mean, it is a fair argument, I guess, but at the same time, I still think as far as the entertainment aspect, I still think it would be fun to watch. And another counter argument is, you know, if they were to legalize all drugs and all athletes would be doping. And, you know, that's a fair argument, because, you know, if all athletes were given the option to use drugs or to not use drugs, I think the athlete mindset would kick in. And I think all athletes would be using drugs at that point. And then even if a natural guy, you know, came up and wanted to do an event, ended up losing, you know, he would say, well, these athletes were on drugs and I wasn't. And, you know, that's a fair argument that, you know, pretty much all athletes would have to be doping to compete in the actual event. But at the same time, you would have to take a second to think about, if you really wanted to be a natural athlete, then you would have to just work really hard. You would have to just start eating right. You have to have the perfect workout regimen, perfect technology as far as equipment goes. And even if you did all that stuff, I don't think it would be enough to beat a doped athlete. So that's a fair argument that, you know, mostly all athletes would be doping at that point if they had the option. And it would be really hard to compete, but, you know, that's just the con of the, you know, regulations, I guess. I mean, there's lots of cons right now in the regulations, and, you know, if they were to say all drugs are now permitted to be used in sport, that's one of the downfalls, that pretty much all athletes would be doping in order to get to the next level. So that is a strong counter argument. But, you know, all athletes would be doping, but like I said, I think my argument to that is, like, athletes, you know, they're already doping, whether we know it or not, they are. And there's some of them may be using the experimental drugs that haven't been detected yet, or something like that. And, you know, even if all athletes were taking drugs, you still have the option to use drugs or not, you know, because drugs are harmful to your body. They do have side effects. It would just be your choice whether or not you want to be a natural athlete or a drugged athlete at that point. So, and, you know, athletes would have to make that decision every day, whether or not they choose to use drugs or not. And I think that's just I think that would just be part of the experience of an athlete is, would I choose to use drugs in order to gain an advantage or to even be matched up with competition? Or can I try to do it the natural way? Because imagine, you know, a few years from now and they drop all the drugs, and then you look at some guy who's going all natural and he beats a drugged athlete. That would be an awesome accomplishment. And so that would just set a whole nother accomplishments out there to be got. It would set a whole nother goal for these natural athletes, I would think. But, you know, it is kind of a con to the argument. But I also just want to talk about, you know, what are the scenarios that I'm thinking of that might actually allow drugs to be permitted in sports, and what would events look like. So I would believe there's two ways that people can come up with events that involve drugged and natural athletes, and WADA would have to make a call that says drug use is legal in a certain event in sport. And so sports can either do a couple things. They can do one where they pretty much have two separate events. One for athletes taking performance-enhancing drugs and other related drugs, and another event in which there's natural athletes. Now that would be a lot of money. That would take a lot of financial. That would take a lot of money to do. And I'm not even sure. Like I said, because people might not be wanting to watch the drugged athletes, I'm not even sure if they would get viewers at that point enough to make money to even be worth it to host two separate things. But that is an option. They could do that. Or another option is they just combine everything. They make it one big thing and they say it's your option, it's your decision to use drugs or not, and ultimately it's going to be your decision whether or not you want to win the competition at that point. And so they can go that way where it's just strictly the athlete's option to use performance-enhancing drugs because they're in one competition. And if that athlete loses, then it may be up to the performance-enhancing drugs at that point, or it could be up to other things, training, diet, whatever it is. But that's the only other way I could see it happening is if they either made one big thing and said, do what you want to do to compete, or if they did two separate things in which they did a drug competition versus a natural competition. And I think that's the only way it could work. I had something in my head that that said it could work another way, but I just couldn't think of it. I just lost it somewhere. But yeah, so that's actually the end of my conversation today. Comment down below what your thoughts on anti-drug is, or the possibility of drugs being banned. Give me some thoughts on some of the points that I tried to make today. And like I said, on that one topic, that one question I asked, should players that have broken a record still get that achievement even after testing positive performance-enhancing drugs, like for example, Mark McGwire, baseball player, or Lance Armstrong, the cyclist who won a couple of Tour de France's, and he tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, but not because of what you think. I think his story is, he was going through testicular cancer at the time, and because he was going through that, his competition was kind of dying down. So in order to kind of recover from the cancer, he was taking what are considered performance-enhancing drugs to get him back to the point of where he can strictly compete just by matching the training regimens and the diet of the natural athletes. And so he was basically just using the performance-enhancing drugs to get back up to a level in which he could compete naturally. And they ended up putting the word out for him, and he confessed to that. And also Michael Phelps, I'm not sure if he was stripped of his gold medals or not. I believe he wasn't. But he was banned from the sport of swimming for I don't know if it was a year or so. Maybe it was at least a year. But they pretty much caught him on video with a marijuana pipe or a bong or some sort. It wasn't even a video of him smoking, it was a picture. And they actually tested him multiple times. He never even tested positive for marijuana use. And they still made him confess because they felt like he was violating the spirit of the sport at that point. So like I said, he wasn't even tested. It was just out of the spirit of the sport. So, yeah, so let me know what your opinion is on that, as far as athletes getting their records taken away. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. I think it's going to be the end of the segment. I hope to do a couple other segments as well for the YouTube channel for you guys. Just a little topic here and there, either by myself or maybe I can FaceTime Chance or Noah, put them on screen, and just give you guys a little something to look forward to each week, because it's going to be hard to put out an hour podcast with all of us getting together at the same time right now. So we're trying to do as much as possible to provide you guys some content while you guys are stuck at home. So without further ado, I guess I'll send you guys on your way, and I'll see you next time. Peace.